Fox Float X tuning guide.
When you go to buy volume spacers, there's two different sets to buy. The blue ones here are not compatible with the newer Fox Float X. Make sure you buy this set with the newspaper and that color spacers. After some investigation, the newer spacers have a channel right here. That's for the air valve. The older ones don't have that.
The newspaper in that set of volume spacers is very useful. This is going to be a trailside tuning video on how to make this thing ride the best. If you need a more basic video, there's one linked in the description. Locating the eye-to-eye measurement, 230.
Then locate the stroke measurement on the outer column. Highlight your stroke number. Locating your stroke measurement, let's find out how much volume spacers maximum you can ride. If you have a big shock like me, it's going to be very little bit of spacers, and a small shock will need more.
Most of the tuning you're going to do on this shock is going to be in volume spacers, so it's very important to get this dialed. When removing the air canister to install the volume spacers, it's super important to let the air out of the shock slowly.
When deflating the shock, if it comes into a fully down position like this, do not take it apart. Reinflate it and press it down to equalize the chambers.
That's why you don't open your shock in a fully down position. It's very important to know what you're working with before you start tuning. These are the volume spacers that were in the shock. That's a 0.2 and a 0.1. You can stack these on top of each other.
If you stack the volume spacers, put the small one in first and the big one will hold it in place. In an attempt to help more people, I'm going to put the small volume spacers that come with it back in the shock and show you how to set it up if you're unable to take the shock apart. If you are more competent, start in the middle for volume spacers.
With no air in the shock, sit on the bike. Measuring the effective stroke of the bike, it's about 65 millimeters as advertised.
Every single shock has a bottom out bumper, and sometimes they have less than the advertised stroke. The stroke doesn't matter. What matters is being consistent. So make this tool how I'm going to show you.
On a piece of cardboard, write down your stroke measurement with a dial caliper or some kind of tool. Mark an arrow in the direction of travel. Stay consistent here. Hey Siri, what's 25% of 65?
That would be 16.25.
The Fox setup guide is very good. 25 to 30% sag is where this shock rides the best, so make your lines at 25 and 30% and highlight 30% because wink wink, that's where it rides best.
Move the compression to the all the way open position, the blue knob to 0. When inflating the shock, depress it a couple of times every 50 psi. This amazing little shock's got a massive negative air chamber that needs a little.
Using your tool, set your sag to 25 to 30% sag wherever you tend to like it. Start with 30 if you don't know what to do. The Fox setup guide is the money, so set the rebound to what Fox says and ride some jump trails. If you don't jump, find some technical single track. You are going to feel the rear suspension feeling nearly perfect straight out of the manual from Fox. Look back on that set of trail with your hindsight and decide, did it feel good, fast, or slow? If it felt good, I want you to go back up to the top of the trail and turn the rebound one click faster. Lighter weight riders are going to benefit big time from a faster rebound because they have less energy going into the shock. Fox suspension, it's really easy to tell when it's set up wrong. I was like, wow, this bike is all over the place. One click too fast. I'm also a very heavy rider. Heavy riders, you may go one click slower. Setting the rebound on the Fox Float X should take you less than 15 minutes. Don't let this overwhelm you. Go on the slow side if you don't know what you're doing or not confident. You're way less likely to crash, but you will suffer from performance. Slide the O-ring up. Let's start working on the compression side of things. It's required to hit 40-foot jumps to set your compression. 4-foot jumps. Whatever it takes, just get the shock into the travel. It doesn't matter how you ride. Focus on how this feels on the big compressions. Watch my shock, blows through the travel, doesn't feel good.
Your sag indicator tool is probably the most important tool in the arsenal besides the digital shock gauge.
The manual specifies you can run this shock at 25% sag, so I pumped it up to 300 psi.
I actually end up learning a lot of stuff on these videos too, so watch this. We're at 299 psi, and I'm gonna lift the bike up. We just dropped 5 psi. So setting sag is not precise, but knowing where you're at with your special tool is very important.
And took a spin on it at 25% sag. It felt amazing on this first part of the trail, very supportive when jumping, so you can ride it with more pressure and less tokens, but there was one massive compromise. Running the Fox Float X at 25% sag is going to sacrifice all small bump sensitivity. Going down in pressure, back to 30% sag, let's start working on the blue knob, the compression. If your Fox Float X does not have a low speed compression knob, don't worry about it. It's completely useless. What that low speed compression knob does, it just chokes the shock up. I would advise to keep the settings at 1 to 2 if you have one, according to feel. This is the time to set it, but I have a couple more tricks up the sleeve to help you out. The low speed compression effectively works like air pressure. I'm not using all the travel with using the low speed compression, and it doesn't feel good, to be honest. Let me tell you what you learned. The shock does not ride good at 25% sag. It kills the small bump sensitivity. The low speed compression circuit's basically useless. So the best thing to do if you can't open the shock is to run it at 30% sag. And when you ride rowdy trails, flip the climb switch down. I learned this from my friend. It's not an original idea, but I went and tested it and I can vouch that it's freaking amazing. It gives you a very plush ride on normal trails, and then it gives you a very supportive compression feel when riding rowdy. So the proper way to do it is to open the shock up and precisely tune the shock to volume spacers per your riding style and weight. But you know, the Otter likes to change things around, so what I'm going to try to do is put maximum volume spacers in the shock and ride it at low pressure. I'm going to tell you how it rides to save you time and headache. This is a 2024 Float X off the shelf, and it comes with 0.3 volume spacers if you're not aware or you're buying one. I recommend buying this shock, it's really good. Post-production Otter here, see that volume spacer? That's for Red Bull Rampage, but let me tell you how it rides. Increasing the volume spacers will allow you to ride more aggressively, more confident at lower pressures. That's the main benefit. My C+ riding style was really benefiting from those extra volume spacers. Unfortunately, I can report max volume spacers at 30% sag is going to kill all your small bump sensitivity. As long as you're willing to compromise all that plushness that you love from Fox, run the max volume spacers because the aggressive riding was really impressive. Next on the chopping block, 35% sag, max tokens. 35% sag did not feel good. It felt unpredictable. The rebound was in the wrong setting because it's outside of the parameters listed in the owner's manual or the tuning guide from Fox. It's best to run this shock in the parameters of 25 to 30% sag. Keep in mind when you put volume spacers in a shock, it's going to change the entire stroke. Even though it will say end stroke, it affects every part of the stroke. After multiple rides on the big volume spacer with different sag numbers, it was time to pull it out. It doesn't give you a balanced shock, it only rides good on the big hits. If you find yourself needing volume spacers and you don't know what to do, start in the middle and then decide, do I need more or less? This is going to save you a lot of time. After installing the middle volume spacer, I took a spin out on the jump line and I was like, wow, I have nothing to complain about. This shock is very rewarding. It just went from hero to superhero. Unlike the Super Deluxe, I don't have anything bad to say about this shock. Even when set up poorly, the Fox Float X performs decently, but if you get it dialed, it's really an amazing shock. The extra time invested in setting up your Fox Float X really gonna pay off in the long run. After getting your base tune set up on your Fox Float X, it's best to ride a variety of trails, especially ones you're not familiar with, to make sure the tune is good. To avoid the next setup mistake on this shock, if there is any, you have to click the thumbnail on the screen.